Our special guest this morning is Thomas Sacoman. He was appointed Director, Passenger Car Brand Products FCA North America in September of 2016. In this position, he is responsible for planning, governance, and lifecycle management of all current and future products in the Dodge, SRT, Chrysler, and Fiat brand NAFTA products. He's also responsible for global production management of Dodge, SRT, and Chrysler products. Before joining Dodge brand, he held the position of Director NAFTA Portfolio Planning since November of 2011. In that position, he was responsible for management of the NAFTA region's long-range product plan for Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Ram, and Fiat products. He joined the company's engineering development program in 1991, and since then has held a series of positions within the company's industrial and commercial organizations. And I won't read them all to you, but there's about a page and a half of different positions that this man has held. So he is very well qualified. So let's welcome Tom.
Good morning, colleagues. Wow. Keynote speaker. Bob, did you ever figure? I worked for Mr. Bob Atwell, one of my very first bosses, and I'm pretty sure he didn't think I was making the 90-day cut. And fortunately, all you retired, so now there's room for people like me to actually do something there, which is crazy. I tell you, it's really a pleasure to be here. All kidding aside, I see a whole lot of familiar faces, and I see you all look younger. You've left. Apparently, it's the stress thing. I think it's a pretty good job. I got to sign up for it. In fact, I have a meeting almost every month with Mr. Marchione called the Product Committee, and I think I'm working on it for retirement. So, I'm going to walk through a couple things. Is it working? Yeah, there's user error involved here, I think. There we go. Okay. So, just a little bit, first of all, if anybody likes the movie Office Space, which I very much do, you remember the line where he says, "What'd you say you do here at this firm?" So I work for Tim Kuniskis, who is the head of NAFTA passenger car brands. The part you didn't talk about. I'm not Jeep and Ram. The rest of the products. And so I'm responsible for all the Fiat, Chrysler, and Dodge brand products. We do. I know there's been a lot of incarnations since you were there. Many of you were different positions. To your point, I've worked for 4 different iterations of the company. I just put it on my whiteboard so I can remember which one it is usually. But product planning is now part of the brand organization now. So my team is responsible for product planning, active lifecycle management, all the pain points, and some of the various things we talked about. Full disclosure, I only play a marketing person on television because I am an engineer, kind of. But I came to the dark side, if you're an engineer, right, to the dark side of planning back in 2010, and I got tapped on the shoulder here a few years later to come over to the Dodge brand. It's an area that I really enjoy. It's a lot of fun. And so what I'm going to walk through today, actually, I'm not going to go through extreme detail of all the product plans. Obviously, I can't do that. I'll not comment on all the questions you're going to ask me after about what all the products are. But I am going to go through a little bit about what we do at Chrysler, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about Dodge. Okay. So at the end of the day, put all the words there. What I told you was what my title was. What do we do? And my team does. You're responsible for this, right? So we maintain unique brands. We're responsible to understand what those brands are, what the needs are, how you distinctly position each one of those cars, and how the customers are different so that we can appeal to what the customers want in the products. It's important by way of context. As you know, we have a unique retail model, right? So we're a little different than everybody else there. You look at Ford or Chevy or really most of the rest of the industry. You've got one showroom, one brand. We are more like a department store, right? So we have one showroom, but we have four to six brands, depending on how you score it, in our 2,500 or so dealer network. So sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge we look at it as an opportunity, however. What that allows us to do is take each one of the brands and make them be a little bit different and be more focused towards who the target customers they are. So when that whole thing fits together, it gives us a market advantage actually over what the competitors are able to do. And so that's how we try to drive what we do. And if you look at each one of the brands that we have out there, the four primary ones between the CJDR part of the showroom, they each serve a different function. Jeep, it's really clear, right? It's about off-road performance. That's what the core is. But there's a different performance aspect for each one. So we separated Ram so it could focus on work performance, on pickup trucks, on those kinds of things. Dodge, on-road performance. I'm going to talk about that in more detail here in a little bit. And then, of course, Chrysler, more of a domestic performance. And I want to talk about Chrysler a little bit here, just a couple of slides before I jump into Dodge for you, because I think that that's one, at the end of the day, I think I can appreciate the fact that you guys are watching us sail the ship you built, right? And there's a whole new different crew on the bridge, and you're like, what the hell is this crew doing? Right? So in some sense, that's the whole message that I'm trying to convey to you is what we're doing, why we're doing it, and hopefully that gives you a little bit of confidence in what's happening. So I want to talk about Chrysler, because that's one that people talk about a lot. Really pretty simple, to be honest. The audience is a modern family for Chrysler, right? So definition of family may continue to broaden, continue to change. Those demographics are really different, older people, younger people, maybe just friends, families, different kinds of groups that go together. But at the end of the day, their needs are pretty common. They're pretty familiar. How do you take a busy and chaotic life that needs space and try to figure out how to best accommodate your family with the product? It's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. That's our wheelhouse for Chrysler. That's what we do. Sorry, clicking too fast. So when we think about our showroom, and I'm gonna reinforce to you again, because I think I'm on a webinar. There's probably somebody in Dearborn watching this right now. I'm not talking about what the future long-range plan is, right? What I intend to tell you here is how we think about what we're doing. And for Chrysler, pretty straightforward, right? So if you think about what we do, we're going to leverage that rich history of innovative people movers. 34 years we've been in the marketplace, and we've been a leader for 34 years when it comes to as a company on minivans. That's our sort of stake and trade. That's what we do. And what we're going to do is focus on that. Focus on, as we move into the changes that we see in the auto industry, best-in-class functionality, but also available electrification, more than 80 miles per gallon MPGe on the Pacific and hybrid, and it's a unique product that's out there. Those are the things we want to do. So as my team thinks about the kinds of things that we should do with this brand, it's about franchising out that and trying to look at how do we have a unique place in the showroom and uniquely address the needs of those customers in places where we already are very good, right? Think about it. Our buyers already recognize Chrysler for that excellence. The points that you see on the bottom left are the reasons that already over-index to the industry on why they buy the cars. Right? And so that's what Chrysler's all about. So just a little bit of warm-up. I want to talk now about Dodge. So again, back to this idea of being unique brands, what's Dodge about? It's pretty clear. Although I'm going to go through a little bit of detail, sort of back in history, and then run through this, because I think to some people they scratch their head and say, what the hell are you doing with Dodge? It seems like you're being very narrow. It seems like you're starting to position it niche. That's not the case. I'm going to take you through and tell you why we don't believe that's what's going on. So if you go the whole way back, right, John and Horace Dodge, they were sort of rebels in their own day, set up this company, told Ford what he could do with his business, started their own, started to make these cars, live fast and loose in a short period of time. They really didn't run the company very long, but they created a legacy that lasted for 100 years, right? And all kinds of great products that all of us have enjoyed, and everybody in this room been part of through those many years. But if I fast forward to where we were in 13, right? So we were post-bankruptcy, trying to build everything back, and we got to 13 and said, man, we're really at a reflection point here. So some strange things have happened. We separated truck out. Dodge used to be a full line, right? Dodge Truck used to be a full line of products. We'd separate truck out. Ram's its own deal. We pulled SRT out. It's different than that. We had 3 different logos in 3 years from some of the products that were there. And frankly, we had products in the showroom that were the badge engineered versions of other cars. It was a little bit of a tough time. So we said, hey, what do we do? What do we do about this? We kind of lost our way. How do we figure this out? because you can't just be another car brand, right? I mean, in the industry today, if you're a commodity, you mean nothing. You can't monetize anything. You can't drive any pricing. You can't collect any money. You can't pay the pension. You can't do all those things. Because this is actually a little bit old. There's actually a couple more than this now. There's over almost 300 nameplates. There's over 40 brands in the industry. You got to mean something. We weren't smart enough to figure it out. So we said, what do smart people think? Al Einstein, pretty smart guy. Hey, be a voice, not an echo. And we said, you know what? We can sit here and roll around the waves and let them toss us up back and forth on the beach, or we can try to make our own way. You know, how do you predict the future? You make your own future. Let's try to figure this out. We've been around for a while. What do? We've been making cars for 100 years. What did we learn? We learned a couple things. Nobody ever put a poster of a Corolla on their wall growing up, right? Hey, show of hands, anybody had a Corolla? Nobody had a Corolla on their wall. Competition, we respect the competition. They're tough competition, you know, but another thing we know is face it, right? I mean, it's true. You know, it is. It's an appliance, and so that's the thing. That's what we know. But we build performance cars. We build modern performance cars. You know, this is what our course has been the wheelhouse. A lot of what Dodge is over many years. It's the thing we admire about the brand. And by the way, that's not just a specific demographic. I always think this guy, if you guys remember the advertising campaign that we had called Wisdom, it was done, I think it was the 2014 Super Bowl commercial, I believe. And it was a Dodge spot, and there was a bunch of 100-year-old folks in this, and they all spoke different things. This guy, Fred Wild, I wasn't on the photo shoot. I'm told he actually did this burnout. This was the unedited version, which we obviously had to edit for what we used in print. But the point here is performance is an attitude. It's not young, it's not old, it's not you know, whatever demographic you want to ascribe to, it's an attitude. And we think we can make some hay with that attitude. So what we did was we looked at this thing and said, okay, first of all, Dodge and SRT need to go back together, right? Because what Dodge is mainstream performance, and SRT is the ultimate version of performance that's inside of the Dodge portfolio. Focus on three fundamental products, and I'm going to tell you more about what that is later, but you know, fast forward a little bit. Once we've established it, we have the #1 share sedan and fastest sedan in the world. We have the best muscle, most powerful muscle car ever. And we have the Durango, which is unique in its marketplace, very successful traction, and has a lot of affinity with the customers who like that. We're different than we straddle between two segments, full size and large. And those are really important products, and they do a lot for us in sales. So, hey, how do we get there? I'm going to go through a little bit about this because I think it's interesting. You know, everybody on the planet pretty much knows about the Hellcat and the Demon, and I'm going to go through a little bit of that, but it's going to be a different perspective. I'll tell you why it's of so much value to the brand, and it's not just because of the performance piece. And there's a reason that's at 600 plus horsepower. If you know about the car, you know it's 707 is what the Hellcat had. But we didn't know that at first. So we know what the cars are, right? The Challenger is the quickest car, 11.2 to 60. It's a 200-mile-an-hour car just about. The Charger's even faster, right off the showroom floor, 11-second quarter mile. It's crazy. It's something they didn't expect to create a lot of buzz. But when we started talking about the car, we didn't have all the specs. When it came time to reveal this, all we knew about the car. The Charger was a surprise. The Challenger was out there, but we didn't talk about the horsepower. And a crazy thing happened, because as we started to leak out, did this little strip tease of information that we started letting out over a period of time. It blew up the internet. So website visits is that chart at the bottom, and you can see where we poke along on website visits to the website for Dodge. And at the end, you can see what happened when we started talking about the Hellcat. And so the real story of the Hellcat is the marketing value that happened as a result of doing that. We sold a lot of cars, and we make money on those cars, but the marketing value is what really elevated the brand. I put XXX on here because I can't share the numbers, but it is an obscene number. And so that's really what the story is about what Hellcat is. Now, we kind of stumbled into that because the reason we didn't announce everything at the beginning on Hellcat is because we didn't know what it was yet. We were just like one step in front of what was happening. But if I come back, and I'll compare that to Demon in a second, but back to the question, did they hear the voice as we start to look at that? Here's what we did know. This data is a little dated, but it's specifically dated because this is just after the end of the year when we started to introduce Hellcat. And what we found was this. We were driving a younger demographic. We had 62% of our customers under 50. Bottom left is Google search interest. We went from a couple years before being way down in the automotive space to #2 for the year of 2016. And in fact, for 2015, and in fact, for about 4 months running, we were #1 Google brand, automotive brand on Google. And we grew our social engagement significantly. We were #1 social engagement brand, actually, above Jeep in FCA. And a lot of that is because of what happened here. So now enter Demon. Oh, never mind, different slide. This is a key point, though. So why do we do all this stuff? I said a minute ago, it's not necessarily the Hellcat, it's the benefit of the rest of this. Can't share all the numbers, but the bottom line is the gray bars are SRT sales, but the red and orange lines are share overall of those cars. We sell 60% V6s when it comes down to it on these muscle cars. They aren't all the big, huge V8s. That's what we talk about. That's not what we sell. We definitely grew SRT sales as a result of doing these cars. But what we did overall was start to grow the share of the products and try to build what the brand is and just really start to build the fans and build the momentum and sell more cars overall. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about, right? So when we moved into Demon, so talking a little bit about Demon, we were smarter, right? We had the experience of Hellcat, and we said, hey, there's something to this. We can actually do this even better. We can generate more interest. You know about the car, unless you're living under a rock, you pretty much know about this car. 840 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 2.3 seconds. It does 965 quick. Pulls a wheelie, pulls the front wheels off the ground. It has a whole bunch of firsts, and we set out to do this from the very beginning. We said, if we're going to do a car like this, it has to be first, best. You can't be second best. You can't just be among the peers. If you're into these cars, you know that people talk a lot about the fact, I always make sure that I point out, this is an intermediate muscle car. It's not a pony car, right? So the Camaro Mustang, which are the primary competitors for this, are smaller and lighter, and they're more road-oriented. We're true to what we are. The car's bigger and heavier, and people used to talk about that a lot until we put 700 horsepower in it, and then 800 horsepower in it. And I haven't read an article about that in a long while, right? But it's the best. It's the thing that's out there. It's the industry's fastest car. That's the story of the vehicle, and it's fantastic. But the story how we market it is actually interesting. So what we did was we ran a whole teaser campaign leveraging what we learned from the Hellcat. When we went to Demon, we said, hey, we can do this. We can really make some hay out of this. And we launched a microsite to start doing teaser videos. And we did that in the week of the auto show in January. I'll let you know a secret. The reason we did the week of the auto show is because one of the primary competitors for this car is the Ford Mustang GT500. The GT500 back in 2013 is the car that came out with 662 horsepower. It was a little bit the Hellcat before the Hellcat. Then we destroyed it 12 months later, and nobody was talking about it. So we're waiting for that car to come out. Still hasn't come out, but we thought they were going to launch it. So we launched this teaser campaign, arguably a little longer than we wanted it to be. Every week, for 14 weeks in a row, we would release a short video about the car. I'll show you in a second. And we would talk about what the car was about. We put little Easter eggs in it, but never give the whole story. And we held part of the story until the very end. We did the reveal. I'll show you an example of one of those videos right now. Every Thursday morning, every Thursday at midnight, this came out for 14 weeks in a row. And it was painful. And everybody in the automotive press was like, when are they going to stop doing this and just tell us about the car? But guess what? They couldn't stop writing about it. And everybody was reading about it. And then we had heard, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I love the story, that every Thursday morning there was a meeting with the key Mustang people down in Dearborn. And they sat around and would try to put the pieces together, right? Like CSI. What the hell is this car? Because nobody knew what the car was. We'd include little things like what you can see in the smoke there. See the 13.5 equals 575 at 500. And the internet would just blow up with what the hell does this mean? Well, it's clearly got 575 horsepower times the blah, 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 blah. They'd make all kinds of theories, and we would just laugh. Because what this particular one meant, by the way, is at 13.5 miles an hour, it's its peak acceleration of 1.8 Gs, which is like a carnival ride, by the way. You drive this thing, it's crazy. And it does that at half second into the run. So we did this, and we went through all these pieces, and And at the end of the day, we revealed the car in New York, and I wish we could have all been there. Actually, it's very cool. We did a reveal at the New York Auto Show. It was on the pier, on one of the piers, just along the Hudson River, and we had an event. And we brought in a lot of influencers and a lot of journalists, tons of journalists, and we had a party. And that paid huge dividends. So I'm actually going to roll a video here for a couple of minutes. Take a look at the video, and then I got a couple comments to make. All right, a couple things about that. It was over the top. I'm not gonna lie to you. It was crazy, but and we lost a little bit of audio on that, but you got the gist of it. You saw the numbers that happened. So a couple stories about that I think are interesting in what we did that event. So that was on a Tuesday night when we did this event. It was before the opening of the auto show, which happened on Wednesday. Press day started on Wednesday, and we did it off site. The guy driving the car, we came into that pier and we prepped it like a drag race track, and which took about 12 hours to do that prep. And the guy driving the car, Jim Wilder, some of you may know him, works at SRT. He's the guy that did the development all the way through. The other side of that wall is the Hudson River. And he practiced that. Yeah, he practiced that all day. And yeah, a couple times he had some wheel lock in the front, and it was a little dicey. But so that was real. That all happened real time. It happened during the event. The event was on a Thursday night, like I said. It was simulcast in we did Facebook Live. It was Periscope. It was in Times Square. It was actually on the wall in Times Square. It was huge. One of theirs you saw in one of the videos. If you probably missed it, it was really quick, but you can see Times Square just full of people. That Tuesday night for the hour we launched was 8 to 9 or 8 to 8:30, 8 to 8:45. We had comparable audience to cable television on that reveal. So there's a lot of people watching. There's a lot of hype, and essentially all that what we do with all the social media and everything happens. It's relatively free. It's not that expensive to put on an event, and in the grand scheme of things, this is what you get. So the little blip on the left side is the 2 million I showed you before. So now this is back to website visits, and on the right side you see what happened as a result of all the activity we're doing, in May with that. And so once again, the big value here is, again, keep in mind, we haven't sold a single car yet, right? So you don't have, we haven't shipped one, so we haven't found cash register yet. But we've really captured value in terms of the marketing, and it helps to sell other cars. In fact, to that point, and we're really, really proud of this, in April of 2017, April of this year, we were #1 share with the Challenger. We've never beat the Mustang. So we've been neck and neck with Camaro. We're going to beat them this year. And in fact, this year, so the Challenge, hopefully, I'm knock on wood, that we hit these numbers by the end, Challenger will have its best year ever in the history of the nameplate, better than 1970. #1 sales. And the Charger is going to be #2, only behind 2006 when we launched it. We were the first full year after we launched the first generation of this series. So that's the benefit of doing the marketing. So a little bit, those of you who ran around those pieces when you were in the tower, you know that's what the benefit is. But I wanted to show you that you get tangible benefit out of that. A couple of points about the future here. Just a couple more slides, and I'll wrap it up. So a couple of things in the industry, you hear a lot, everybody saying, the industry's shifting to EV, right? It's going to EVs, cars are dead, going to EVs. It's a little more nuanced than that. There's two things, big things that are going on in the industry right now. One is there is a consumer preference towards two-box cars, right? And there's a reason for that. It's a more modern aesthetic. It's something that Europe did 25 years ago, 30 years ago. Hatchbacks versus sedans. In Europe, sedan is an old man's car. Drive that. It's a modern car. It's a hatchback. And so there's more functionality for those kinds of body styles. We went through that as well, right? In the 70s, there was tons of compact hatchbacks for exactly that reason, because they're better utility. So that's a big trend that's going on. The second piece that really drives this, though, is regulation. So as regulation continues to skew towards us trying to do, have to deal with it. Regulation is tending us to skew towards things that make you a truck classification. There's two primary things that are very helpful in that case. One is ground clearance, and the other one is all-wheel drive, or four-wheel drive. And so the regulation is driving the cars up and driving towards all-wheel drive. Well, those two key pieces, they're UV, but they're not exclusively UV. There's other things going on as well. So talk about performance, and if you think about it, we believe, and we're building evidence to support, I think, this position, is that performance is the next trend. So if you think about other trends that occur, think about safety, right? So Volvo used to distinguish itself from safety, Mercedes to some extent. It's a commodity now. Everybody has the same safety, more or less. Active safety where they try to outdo each other, but at the end of the day, all the cars are safe. Luxury, you buy leather in a Kia, right? It's not, it's everywhere. Electronics, everybody's racing to put the same kind of content in the cars. Those were once, aspirational differentiators of premium cars, but then they migrated down to the mainstream and everybody has them now, so they aren't differentiators anymore. Performance is the next one, and if you think about it, think about premium cars. What premium car can you think of that's not about performance? Like none. Bentley, right? Rolls Royce, they're about huge engines that are, nobody does just luxury. It's always performance that's with it. If you look at Lexus, who was one of the slower ones to the switch, they didn't do the switch over to performance until recently. As they introduced all their F-Sport models, they regained the luxury title a few years ago, and we're not in the news anyway, and I like their assessment on it, that's a key piece of why they were able to do that shift and collect more volume. So we think that's the case. We think that's what's going on, and nobody's really there in the mainstream. We're moving toward it. So some of the clues that are in the present here about that future, one thing is that our other OEMs are signaling that they're going to go there. Ford, Chevy have always had an element of that and have reinforced it in recent years, offering more performance cars. Even Kia's getting in the business. Hyundai Kia hired a guy by the name of Bierman who used to develop all the M cars over at BMW. They hired him away so he could go over and develop their cars. And if you see some of their newer cars, there's definitely a performance image to everything they're doing. So they're trying to go mainstream performance. The other piece, and when it comes to the body style piece that I was telling you about, I think Porsche is a great example of that. So if you think about Porsche, came out in 1948. Porsche was, invented, the 356 came out, and those cars, the only proper way for years and years and years, a proper sports car, 2 doors, right? Maybe 2 are hardtop, maybe 2 are convertible, but it was 2 doors. It's the only way to do a proper hardtop until they introduced the Cayenne. And you can see the red volume. Those are volumes for each year. When they introduced that in 2003, they haven't looked back. 74% of Porsche's mix is UV now. They've never sold the same number of regular sports cars, proper two-door sports cars, since they've shifted over and started to build, both between the Cayenne and the Macan that's come out, and then even the Panamera, which is a little bit of a unique car because it's a hatchback, right? It's a four-door kind of, it's a fastback, and back to this idea, right, of two box and the ability to have flexibility in the car. So we think all the evidence is there. And so our angle, you know, again, not an LRP slide exactly, but the point here is this. What we're trying to do with Dodge is to create an action alibi for moving people into fun cars, in the muscle car, into performance, in the mainstream, right? So what happens is, you know, you get sort of a look on the left. Who doesn't like a Challenger? They're beautiful. They're great. I actually think they're functional. I've had 8 of them. Grew up with kids in them. I put a Christmas tree in a trunk once. They have a lot of room. But they're not for everybody. It's hard to get in the back seat, obviously, for all the reasons that you go into different kinds of cars. So we've taken the Charger and Durango, and we've sort of turned them, we call them, you know, the Charger's the four-door muscle car. Its top cross shafts are actually, it cross shafts a Mustang higher than it would the cross shafts other sedans. So, and the Durango as well, more sort of a two-box muscle car. That's how we're trying to position it. And the idea here is to create an alibi for people to actually buy the kind of car that has the attributes that they really want. They don't have to sacrifice for it. And so that's what we look to in the Dodge lineup in the future. It works. It is working. We have evidence that it's working. We're continuing the trend towards having good demographics on the brand. Our most important purchase reasons are the things that we emphasize. And by the way, again, not all the cars are the high-performance versions, yet our top purchase reasons are things like power and acceleration, engine performance. They're things that are the fun attributes. They look a lot like premium cars. It's those kinds of attributes. And then finally, just one last point, because you're probably sitting there going, he didn't say anything about the highest selling nameplates in his brand, right? Cherry's #1. You know, Caravan is, those are the top 2 selling nameplates in total volume for the brand. Absolutely. And there's reason for that. The other 3 cars I was talking about are 4/5 of our sales comp. And so the emphasis on performance is working. It brings the cash register, pays my check, pays your checks. It's something that we think is working really well. So that is the story of Dodge and performance, and why hopefully you have some confidence that we haven't lost our freaking minds. Know what's going on. So that's about it. I'm going to guess there's questions. Bob said he's got a stump the chump question for me. So, yes. No comment. We didn't talk about autonomy.
You didn't mention anything about autonomy. Could you speak to how autonomy factors in over the next 10 years in terms of product planning and volume planning?
It's certainly a trend, right? Everybody's working on it. We're actively working on it significantly. It's a big trend in the industry. There's going to be places where it makes more sense than not. There's a couple things. I'll speak in general, then I'll talk about specifically these brands. In general, I would say that jury's out a little bit on when you actually have full autonomy implementation in a safe way in mass with. It's probably a longer time horizon for those things. There may be limited routes and areas and places where that technology is there. It's definitely coming. I think one of the bigger nearer term benefits of the autonomy though is driver assistance. It's allowing people to drive safer. Blind spot and cross path, right, is a key, very simple technology that's just ubiquitous. I mean, it's on pretty much everything now because it is a great feature. It's actually causing bad behavior, right? People don't turn now to look at what's going on, so you have to be a little bit careful with that. But I think the ability for people to drive longer, for people to drive safer, is going to be one of the key benefits that happens across the lineup when it comes to autonomy, and eventually the time we get here. Specific to these cars, I think when I think about our brands, and primarily Chrysler and Dodge, there's a huge place in it for Chrysler, right? Because it fits right in with all the things that we talked about. Dodge is kind of, people want to drive their car, but there's still ways to integrate it. You could do an automatic drag race mode Just sit back and let it take you for a ride, you know? If it's on a track, you could do, we've looked at track mapping and actually being able to have sort of a driver assistance to help you make sure that you can run a course on the optimum line and do different things, and it can intervene to, to help you do that. So I think there's all kinds of different ways. That technology and electrification, somebody's going to ask about electrification, it's absolutely coming. We're not always going to be able to have, 840 purely internal combustion engine horsepower going through this. Great. These are the days that I never thought I would see again when I joined the company. Thought I missed the whole damn thing. Here we are in the golden age of it. My concern is that it's as fleeting as it was in 1968, 69, and 70. But we'll see. GHG is certainly an issue when it comes to that. We will integrate electrification into all these things. And again, electrification is something that you can show in many different ways to the customer. It will be a Jeep. Ultimate torque at 0 RPM is fantastic for climbing over rocks. For a Dodge, hey, launch is fantastic when you have, all of that right there. And then you want an IC engine on the top end where you start to run out of steam. So it's all coming. Those technologies are there. We're eyes wide open on that. We're by no means are we, sort of blinders on. Absolutely. Bob.
It would seem you would have a great opportunity with two cars, the Fiat 124 and the 500X. They were introduced the last couple of years, and even though Fiat sales were never very great, they're down like over 20% with two brand new cars. And I wonder if you would consider the next time you refresh them, put a Dodge front end on them. That little Miata would make a great Dodge, and the 500X would make a great entry-level vehicle. And before the Fiat 124 was introduced, this was about 4 years ago, your predecessor was at a meeting, and I asked him, because he mentioned the Fiat 124 was coming, I said, why didn't you call it a Dodge? You'd sell 3 or 4 times as many. He was very honest. He said, we never thought of that. Now that you've had a chance to think about it, how about it? Make them Dodges.
Well, I thought I removed that slide. Here. No, clear. Absolutely. Absolutely something we haven't missed and we have thought about. And there are opportunities there. I'll say about Fiat, because I haven't talked about Fiat at all, right? I will say about Fiat that the big challenge on Fiat, and the thing that we're trying to solve, it's network, right? I mean, there's only a handful of those dealers that are out there. We're trying to expand those into CGDR showrooms so that you have more outlets. I mean, you just can't compete with 2,500 outlets versus 380. And it's hard to do the throughput on that. And now those outlets are getting, alphas. And so, that's what the challenge is for us on our side from an operations standpoint, is to try to get more stock out there. So that's what we work on. But those are viable alternatives, very viable alternatives.
Question over here.
Hi, Tom.
Bob, how are you?
Good.
Good.
Good presentation. You didn't talk at all about the future of the Chrysler 300. I wondered if you could, is there any way you could comment on that?
300 is a nice car. No, it really is. 300 is an awesome car, right? And we do, and what we find is, I mean, I can tell you about about 300, and it is very different car demographic. I can demonstrate that it does not overlap on charger, and that attracts a different customer. I think as we look into the future, what we're going to have to determine is how does it fit with what I just talked about what the image of that brand is. That's about all I can say on that. But and I can also tell you that the SRT version of that with a 392 is really fun to drive on that. But we don't have it here. It's only in Europe. We could go to Australia. Next meeting, Australia. We'll drive. Bob and I will drive 392 SRT 300s.
There's a tremendous amount of buzz about autonomous vehicles now. How do you deal with the future when all the cars are going to be turned into the equivalent of a refrigerator?
I want to be not in the auto industry, I guess, when that happens. I mean, that's not going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. At the end of the day, there is, speaking for me, not for anybody else. I think the points that I made about those technologies moving into the mainstream, absolutely true. That's going to happen in a big way. I don't know what the details of the future will be with regard to that. There are a lot of ways where we can solve congestion issues and mass transportation issues with still having somebody have the ability to have their own device, if you will, but put the device online and be able to work with other devices. It's certainly an easier way. Going down to Detroit and digging it up to put a new subway in ain't ever going to happen, but you can do things above ground that help with autonomy. But I think at the end of the day, there is still going to be a demand that's in there. People still ride horses. They don't ride a lot of them, but they still ride them. My daughter does. It's expensive. I don't recommend it. But there's still people that make really good ones and sell them. There's just not that many. Yeah. And very, very profitable. So I think our task is to keep our finger on the pulse of this thing and evolve our business in a way that can figure out when we get to crossroads on things like that. Does that really happen? I don't know. If it does, you sure as hell better be on the win side of that and figure out how to move your business and migrate your business. Right? 3M with the Post-its, right? Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, is that what they stood for? The Post-it pads. Who'd have thought? Not where they started. Yeah, tape.
Do you see any need for a performance two-seat sports car?
Absolutely. Just not a lot of them. Absolutely. It kills me that on my watch the Viper died. Viper, right? Ultimate, it's one of the reasons I came to this company. But it's harder and harder to make, it was long in the tooth, it's hard to make business cases as you move forward. Regulatory concerns become more and more onerous. Yeah, there's a place for it though. There's always going to be a place for that. And I can't speak to future product, but I'll tell you, we certainly aren't ignoring the fact that market still exists. Something about pure sports car. The end of the Viper piece, by the way, for those of you who don't know, at the very end, we really turned that thing around. So we did 3 things in the last couple of years on that car. We did the one of one, which basically said, look, you buy a car like this, it's more like buying a yacht than it is buying a car. So let's let you customize it. That was a big deal. We did the ACR. 13 track records. It's the fastest street legal race car that you can buy, and it puts everything else from the other guys across town and a lot of stuff from Europe on the trailer. That was a big deal. And then in the last year, instead of just doing hey, we're going to build 600 cars and be done, we made a series of limited edition models. So we basically had like 6 different versions of the end of the car. So that was very popular. We sold them out really, really fast at the end. So it had a bright ending, and it ceremoniously, with the big event down at CAP, went out on a high. Went out with all of its records, went out with an outstanding and loyal customer clientele that we're going to try to keep retaining for other products that they buy. So,
how does Alfa Romeo fit into the scheme of things?
Alfa's our premium brand, right? So Alfa's BMW, Audi, Mercedes. It actually, from an organizational standpoint, it stands alone. It stands with Maserati. So we really view that as a different part of the business, and they have autonomy to the rest of what we do. They're not part of our network, and their idea, and if you've read some of the things on the car, so the Giulia's launched, and now the UV Stelvio, and they are outstanding. They went right to the jugular of the guys that are historically have owned that segment from a performance standpoint. BMW 3 Series, those kinds of cars. 505 horsepower. The thing's fast sell, set a record on Nürburgring. But that is very much our premium offering. So that's the connection between. It doesn't really fit in. Everything we do in our showroom is basically mainstream. We have some products, obviously, that are priced above general mainstream pricing, particularly with SRTs, but generally we're mainstream brands. There will be some sharing of technologies to a limited extent.
Are there any plans for Chrysler to get back into the race car program like NHRA?
Call me on, who's asking the question? There you are. Yeah, call me on Friday. There's a commercial committee tomorrow. We actually are pretty active in NHRA at this point. So Mopar does big sponsorship, and Dodge sponsors with Mopar, and we have Leah Pritchett and Don Schumacher Racing is sort of our key piece. So we're in Top Fuel Funny Car. We do a lot of the stock stuff with the Challengers, so the drag pack Challengers, and do contingency there. And we're trying to get more into grassroots. It's a good place. It's actually, NHRA is a fantastic return on your investment in terms of the number of eyes that it gets. And now they have, they're on national or Fox on Sundays, and so it's actually it's a pretty good marketing spend. And it works well with our brand, with Dodge.
Hey, Tom.
Howdy.
At one point in time, years ago, we had a product planning life cycle where we would do majors every 6 years, and minors every 3 years, and we had multiple major launches per year. Now it seems like we're down to corporate-wide, one major launch a year, and some of our product is getting long in the tooth. I know we keep hyping them, but are we ever going to get to a point where we're not just pulling the wool over the customer's eyes with old product and get back to more than one major launch a year?
So you would fall over if you saw what some of the investments look like nowadays. Yeah, it's becoming just increasingly expensive to do the kind of core development that when you really do these sort of all new kind of thing, new platform, new top hat, new everything. What we spend a lot of time doing, we govern by, I don't know who's familiar with the way the process works now, various incarnations of similar types of government management governance processes have been in place over the years. They're all kind of similar, but we have a product committee now, so it would be like the old product, what was it called? Product Executive Committee, PEC, you know what it was called? Similar to that. We meet once a month with Mr. Marchione and all the heads, the heads of NAFTA, and we take product actions in. Just had one last Friday, still at the scars. And we go in and we talk about product in a lot of depth. And we talk a lot about what's the performance. So if the default position is, hey, you know what, we run those cycles. It's 6 years, it's 3 years for an MCA. Here's what the LRP looks like, and we lay it down. Yeah, we do that, make an LRP that's a piece of paper, and then we talk a lot about what's the performance in the marketplace and figuring out whether we're making wise investment spends. So in some products, you say, hey, you know what, that's actually performing really well. I don't know if we need to take intervention yet. Let's make sure that we wisely use what the capital is that's there. On the other hand, we have some other ones where we're going to say, hey, it needs an intervention earlier. So we try to monitor performance on a regular basis and then take as much in as we can in the product committee to get things approved. But honestly, I give you an example. I mean, I was talking about Challenger and Charger, best year ever for both of those things. So those are in declining segments. What we've done on those cars is very active lifecycle management every year, add stuff, TAs and Daytonas and different trims on the interior and Hellcats and Demons and all kinds of stuff like that to just keep the buzz and keep the meeting on. And those cars are outperforming their segments big time. So we've been holding volume, gaining share in shrinking segments. So I know it's not a fantastic answer. I know what you're fishing for, but at the end of the day, you can rest assured that we spend a lot of hours worrying about how to be efficient with the capital that we spend and then going after the products that really matter and really bring the cash register.
With all the performance-minded Dodge, and I love it, any thoughts of NASCAR?
Yeah, sure. My boss was talking about it. My boss's boss, Mr. Marchione, was talking about it not too long ago. Yeah, we evaluate all the motorsports opportunities on a regular basis. And so, there's nothing to announce right at this point, but we certainly keep our finger on the pulse of all of that. That one's an expensive one. Good payback, but deep pockets to get in there. And they're in the midst of a decline right now too. They're actively seeking a couple of new OEMs, I think. and their viewership is down, their participation is down at the tracks, and so they're going through a little bit of a recharge cycle, I think. All the older drivers that everybody knows the names of are all retiring, and the new breeds coming through. Amen. Brad Kozlowski thinks so too. I don't know if you've been paying attention to this. Yeah.
Mustang and Camaro have convertibles.
Yeah.
What about a convertible for the Challenger?
Yeah, I would love to do a convertible. And like everybody probably in here would say, that's the one I want to get. The fact of the matter is the convertible volume has fallen off the cliff. It's almost all their volume is fleet. It's rental fleet V6 cars that go down to Florida, so that when you go to Florida or California, you rent those things. We've looked at it a bunch of times. As we take product actions, we'll look at trying to enable that. It's not really enabled in the base architecture that we have for that car right now. But yeah, it's always an interesting place to go. It's always a place that people are really passionate about, but it's really, really hard to make a business case. At the end of the day, there's just not a lot of volume there. Wish ASC didn't go out of business, right? We call them up.
When I pulled in today, like a Pacifica parking lot here.
Thank you.
It was excellent. Really happy with mine. My question is there any thoughts to doing a performance-oriented Dodge version? You know, the marketing seemed like it's been geared towards guys a lot.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk to you after you've got an idea.
You and Ralph Shields.
Yeah, I saw.
We have at least one. Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually looked at a lot of that. So I'd say two things about that. One is that we just actually three things. One is that we just introduced the S models, like just introduced them. They're not out yet. We just did a press release this week, which is we've done S models in the past. But there's an S300. We've done S models in the minivan. So we did like a more sport appearance version of that car. It's an appearance package largely, but it's pretty cool to try to get that try to capture a little bit of that. You mentioned the advertising campaign. So the idea on that was that that was to try a different angle on marketing and try to address the sort of build your dad brand kind of thing, to try to make a more equal type of an appeal. That was why we did that. That was a different approach to take. But at the end of the day, one of the things, it's certainly a viable thing to do, would be to do two brands there. But kind of gets back to the thing I was talking about. The problem with it is it's interesting, but it doesn't really appeal to the core of what Dodge necessarily is, unless we put some teeth in it to try to do something that really works. Platform's not exactly designed for that kind of thing. But yeah, we don't throw out anything when we try to explore all kinds of opportunities. There's a place to get some incremental volume, I would try to find it. Yep.
Okay. Thank you,
Good.
Tom, for
Thank you
for your presentation.
Nice.